Homeowner forum.
Homeowner forum.
You know what that's all about as a manager?
No idea.
No idea. Well, let's talk a little bit about it, right? How do you manage it, I think, is the key today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So before we get to that, though, it's a reminder that associations, especially if they're under HOA, the Minnesota Common Interest Ownership Act, if they're under that, they have to have their board meetings be open, right, to the members to attend.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you have to have an open forum, but I think a lot of associations have just taken on this practice of giving homeowners a little bit of an opportunity at a board meeting. Because a board meeting is a board meeting, not a member meeting.
Right.
But I think a lot of associations have this practice of, well, let's just carve out some time for the homeowners' input. So if they do that, how can they do that effectively is what we kind of want to talk about, right?
So I would say that, the first thing you want to do is you really want to try to control the meeting environment.
Yes.
And by that, I mean you want to set up the homeowner open forum in a way that makes sense. You want to, set expectations and set realistic expectations for what the homeowner forum is.
Sure.
And you also want to set a realistic time for the homeowner forum. And by time, I mean length of time,
right.
Particularly. There's, many scenarios where you'll have a board or an association that puts, a 15-minute open forum on there, and one homeowner takes 15 minutes. And
Sure.
then what do you do?
Right.
Right?
Yep. So you're talking about really kind of setting up procedures or parameter.
Yeah, 100%.
For what
Yep.
this looks like. Maybe even a policy in the rules and regs.
Yeah, sure.
I think one of the common ones I've seen is submit to the management company that you want to be on the agenda, who you are, what your topic is, so that we can, prepare for you.
Yeah.
And have you on the agenda, listed on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have a heads up of what you're gonna, what your topic is, that gives us a chance to prepare for it and facilitate a productive conversation, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, we're, being reactionary to your topic,
Yep.
And we're not going to get anywhere.
Right. You mentioned expectation, though. So before we talk, we talked a little bit about procedures. We can talk a little more, but I want to go back to that expectation piece.
Sure.
That's a little more subjective. I think one of the biggest things I like to work with boards and homeowners to understand is an expectation of what the result is.
Right.
From attending that open forum.
Yep.
So you talked about setting a tone. I always try and tell a board, either you say it or I'll say it. We've got 15 minutes. In the next 15 minutes, we've got these three people.
Yep.
As a reminder, whatever your topic might be, the goal here is for you to tell us what's on your mind. We'll take it into consideration and let you know what the result is. So it's my way of reminding the board and the homeowner, don't feel like you're forced to respond to this, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Right now and solve it right now. That's not the expectation.
Well, and it's not realistic either.
Exactly.
I mean, at that point, you're just kind of scrambling to find an answer when
Right.
really you should be taking the time to, deal with the issue and resolve it in, the correct way, right? Rather than trying to appease the person who's asking the question during the meeting, right?
Sure.
So again, it's just setting realistic expectations.
Sure. So here's one of the philosophical conversations about the open forum. Is it before the meeting or is it after the meeting?
Flip a coin.
Flip a coin. Yep.
No, there's pros and cons to both, right? So I would say I'm basically split with the associations that I manage. If I had to guess which way it leans, it would be before the meeting.
Okay.
I think there's pros and cons to both. The pro to doing it before the meeting is it allows a homeowner who wants to talk about something to do it at the start of the meeting. They may not have any interest in attending the entire meeting. The con is that it may be something that is covered in the meeting anyways.
Sure.
Doing it at the end of the board meeting as well has pros and cons. Pro of that is a topic that a homeowner may have been waiting to speak on might have already been covered during the meeting.
Yep.
Another pro is by the end of the meeting it starts to it helps the homeowner kind of contextualize what it is the association's been doing.
Expands our worldview a little
Exactly,
bit.
yes.
Yep.
So if there's a topic that, they were considering, bringing to light at the homeowner forum, maybe they, once they have more context as to what is going on at the association, maybe that topic's not as important to them anymore.
Sure.
Maybe it's been covered. Maybe they got bored and left during the meeting.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, meeting fatigue is real,
exactly.
right? Yeah,
I mean, we're not trying to encourage that, and we're certainly not trying to,
dissuade it in some
exactly.
way. Yeah.
We're not trying to push it to the end of the meeting so that we have a better chance of no one talking, right?
Right.
We're just trying to, give people the information first and then let them decide if that topic is still something that they want to talk about.
It's interesting. Over the course of my experience as a manager, I've flipped dramatically on it. I used to be a proponent of before, because then you can control it. We've got the meeting starts at 6:15. Open forum is from 6 to 6:15, and at 6:15 we are starting the meeting.
Yes.
Right? So like you're able to control it a little bit more. And the other pros that you mentioned too, but I've come to like the end of the meetings a little bit more as I've gone along, and I think it's first and foremost because the reason you touched on is that a lot of times whatever was on their mind was probably already covered during the board meeting.
Right. Yep.
Yep. Or also, as you said, worldviews were expanded. The noise issue of my neighbor next door isn't quite as important as the $200,000 contract that you guys are voting on tonight. So maybe I'll just work with the manager on that and not bring it up tonight.
That's valid. I mean, I've had almost that same scenario.
Yeah. And honestly, again, not to dissuade people from coming to a meeting, but
sure,
not to dissuade them from coming, but maybe it's not worth it for them to stick around for an hour to bring up their point. So I've really come to like it at the end, but pros and cons to both, as you said. Setting up a procedure, setting up an expectation, deciding when you're going to have it, realizing that you don't have to have it, right? Again, it's an open meeting of the board, but it doesn't mean you have to have it. And the one last thing I'll always like to tell a board about that homeowner forum, a reminder that that's not a part of the meeting. So I always like to tell the board secretary, don't include notes of this person bringing up that's not that's a whole nother podcast, right? About what goes in meeting minutes and what doesn't. So that's a whole nother topic. But an open forum doesn't have to be reflected, and in my view, it shouldn't be reflected in the meeting minutes. Yeah. Because then it holds the board accountable now. Doing what we talked about before is the expectation of, hey, your open forum idea is not an action item of the board. Right. And if it's in the meeting minutes, then it might be reflected as that. Yeah. So that'd be the last kind of advice about controlling and better navigating that open forum piece, is to not include it in the minutes because it's not an official part of the meeting. Right. And then call the meeting to order.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a pro to having it at the start too, right?
But also, if you do it, if you do it at the end, right? Meeting is adjourned. Yep. We'll stay for open forum if anyone wants to hang out, right?
Exactly.
So it sets the tone.
Yep. There's no wrong way to do it. Right. But the key is to set realistic expectations and stick to them.
Stick to them. Yep. Right. Yep. Because you stick to the tone of the meeting that should be expected, so all board members know what happens at a board meeting.
Yep. 100%.
Right? Yeah. Indeed. Well, it's always a good topic, and hopefully some people found some information helpful.